Hello and welcome. When big business and local cultures clash, who stands to lose the most? In the case of Chevron Oil Company and the Ecuadorian people, the issue has dragged on 17 years in what's being called the world's largest environmental lawsuit. What will it take for a resolution sooner rather than later to prevent further suffering on ruined farmlands? Well, severe pollution from oil production in Ecuador's remote rainforest has contributed to years of misery and sickness for the people who live there. They say that the cancer deaths and skin diseases have risen significantly since Texaco and Petroecuador jointly began pumping and drilling there in the early 60s, although the oil companies strongly dispute the claim. Well, that oil consortium stopped operations there almost 2 decades ago. Local residents filed a lawsuit in 1993 to claim damages for their contaminated lands. Chevron inherited that lawsuit when it acquired Texaco in 2001, but the oil giant claims a previous agreement between the Ecuadorian government and Texaco now clears Chevron of any responsibility. Well, today we ask, what will it take to end the international wrangling and provide the local Ecuadorians with the solutions they need so desperately? Remember, you can join our conversation with your questions and comments. Joining us today to discuss the situation is Luis Llanza, a community activist from the polluted area in Ecuador's rainforest who founded the Amazon Defense Coalition. In 2008, Mr. Llanza was co-winner of the prestigious Goldman Environmental Prize for his work. He joins us from Quito in Ecuador. From New York, we have Joe Berlinger, a documentary filmmaker who directed the movie Crude about the Chevron lawsuit and the environmental problems in Ecuador. And joining me here in Washington, D.C. is Don Campbell, manager of external relations for Chevron and former editor of the Calgary Herald. Gentlemen, I welcome you all to the show. And Luis Llanza, if I could start with you, sir, and ask what you're hoping to achieve from the lawsuit. It's been going on so long, 17 years now. I mean, what do you expect to happen?
Well, we're more than 30,000 Ecuadorians who are struggling for reparation of the environmental, social, and cultural damages that have been caused by the operations of Texaco Corporation during the time that it was in Ecuador. The only thing that we want is justice, and justice for us is understood as Chevron assuming its responsibility for making reparation for the damages, cleaning up the pollution, giving people their health back, and making reparation to the indigenous peoples for all of the harm that they caused when they were taking oil out of Ecuador.
Now, Senor Llanza, $27 billion, of course, a huge award that you're going for. How would that money be used exactly?
Look, the $27 billion was established by an independent expert appointed by the court. That amount of money is still very little compared to the magnitude of the harm caused by Texaco's oil operations in Ecuador, because there are even irreparable damages. Nonetheless, the final amount will be set by the judge when he issues the judgment based on the evidence and based on the law. And the sum determined by the judge, well, we will earmark that for reparation for the environmental and social damages that people have been suffering as a result of bad operational practices on the part of Chevron before Texaco during the time it was in Ecuador.
Let me bring in Joe Berlinger here. And Joe, you directed the film Crude. Let me ask you, what made you want to touch that topic in the first place?
Well, you know, actually, I went into this film kicking and screaming. You know, the lawyer, the American lawyer for the plaintiff, Stephen Donziger, came to my office and told me about the case. And it wasn't necessarily a film I thought I should get involved in for a lot of reasons that are probably not germane to this particular conversation. Let's just say I went down to the Amazon very reluctantly, but when I went down there and saw the environmental degradation in a place that is supposed to be paradise. You know, the Ecuadorian Amazon is one of the few places on Earth that actually survived the last ice age, and there's a tremendous level of biodiversity down there. And what I saw was a region that was barely surviving 40 years of oil production. And I just felt embarrassed to be an American if it were true that an American company had anything to do with this. That doesn't mean I was taking sides in the lawsuit, but definitely an American company had gone down and exploited oil in this region, and what I saw made me want to investigate further what had happened. Just a quick thought, Joe. How do you make sure you have balance and you see both sides of the story? Because of course, getting a snapshot of you could be very deceiving. Yeah, well, you know, no film can adequately. Film is inherently a superficial medium on a certain level, although I think the film is very thorough. You know, I believe the film is extremely balanced. There are an equal number of Chevron arguments represented in the film as there are plaintiffs' arguments. In fact, I think the film is extremely neutral with regard to the legal issues in the lawsuit. But the film is not, you know, I'm not kidding anyone to think that the film is neutral with regard to my sympathies for the indigenous people and the impact that oil production has had on this region. Whether Chevron has presented enough legalities to prevail, you know, in the court, that's for somebody else to determine.
Okay.
But what I saw, you know, was extremely shocking and worth putting on film.
Well, Don Campbell, you're from Chevron. It's good to have you here, sir.
Thank you.
I wonder, you know, I mean, of course, Chevron denies any wrongdoing. I think you have a sort of countersuit in effect. And I guess no one disputes there is environmental damage taking place down there. What's your position? How do you defend Chevron's involvement, or, you know, alleged involvement in this? How do you justify your position?
Well, I think what both Mr. Janza and Mr. Berlinger need to keep in mind is that the oil production that people see on the ground, the pollution they see on the ground today, is the result of Petroecuador's ongoing operations. Texaco and Petroecuador were together in the consortium. They ended that consortium in 1992 when the Ecuadorians wanted 100% of the oil production, 100% of the profits, and they were willing to accept 100% responsibility for the environment. So there was an agreement. Texaco signed off, remediated and had signed off its share of the environmental remediation that was done, and at the time the damage was minimal and local. But in the last 18 years, Petroecuador has been a willful polluter. The government of Ecuador has taken $70 billion out of oil production in that region, and Petroecuador has had 1,400 spills alone just since 2000. So the pictures of fresh oil you see on the ground are Petroecuador pollution, and it's their responsibility.
Let me ask you one thing then. If you effectively, sorry, one second, Joe and Luis, I just want to check with Mr. Campbell, though. If you've effectively inherited the legacy of what was happening before with Texaco and Petroecuador as well, did someone at Chevron fail to do enough due diligence to prevent you getting into the situation in the first place?
No, because there was a legitimate process around which Texaco sites were scrutinized and which the remediation was signed off. What's happened here is that U.S. attorneys are leading this fight, and this is not a fight between big business and local communities. This is a fight between a New York and Philadelphia legal consortium and an American company. And that consortium is trying to use pollution by Petroecuador and blame it on Chevron. In fact, if you look at the facts here, there are a few things that are not in dispute. One is the #1 health issue in the region is contamination of water, not by oil, but by fecal matter, human and animal waste. And that is the leading health issue in the country today. Secondly, Petroecuador is an ongoing polluter in Ecuador, and they're not being held responsible. The plaintiffs are not going after Petroecuador. The reason why they don't go after them is because the government is siding with the plaintiffs on this. They're trying to drive a judgment against us, and the plaintiffs know that if they drag Petroecuador into this lawsuit, the government will not let this thing proceed and they won't get any money. So there's a scam being orchestrated here, and no one is pointing that out.
Well, let's have a quick look at a clip from Crude, the documentary Joe Bellinger has made, and this is where a Chevron lawyer is examining a site with a judge and the communities and lawyers, and it's subtitled in English. Well, let's have a look.
Presidente, aquí hay documentos de Petroecuador que no pueden ignorar. Derrames, señor presidente, abundantes derrames que han contaminado estos mismos cauces.
Mr. Luis Janza, let me ask you about this. What sort of unity there is among the people over this issue, and how much real support have you had from the president and the government of Ecuador, and how do you address this issue of not taking Petroecuador to task as well?
I feel great indignation when I hear the manager of Chevron say a number of half-truths and lies. I can give testimony about what happened there because I went to Lago Agrio in 1977, and I saw how Texaco would just pour oil on the highways. I would walk along the oil that they would pour onto the roads, and that would contaminate the river where our our sons, our brothers would bathe. I saw how Texaco would set fire to the pools and would create a huge fire, and this would contaminate the rainwater. I saw that and much more. And I cannot accept this gentleman coming to say now that there's no pollution and that what you have now is all the result of Petroecuador. We don't deny that Petroecuador, as he says, rightly so, continues to pollute. It continues to pollute. But those who began this pollution and this disaster, it was Texaco, because they were the ones who operated the wells, the facilities. They designed that cheap, obsolete technology, which today is affecting more than 30,000 Ecuadorians. It is false that the government is allied with us. It is the Chevron people who try to drag the government into it through international arbitration, through corrupt acts such as these videos, to drag the government in, to involve it in a case that needs to be resolved in the judicial system. We trust in the judicial system, and the judicial system issuing its resolution based on the evidence and on the law. That is all we expect.
Mr. Khan, I'm going to ask you to hold fire just for 1 second. You'll get a chance to respond in just a moment, sir, because we have to take a very short break here, but we get back into our discussion in just a moment. We'll be right back.